Thank you so much for joining us, Greg. We just really appreciate your time. And before I get started, I wanted to say a huge thank you from the bottom of my heart for your service, not just as a Commissioner for Fire and Rescue New South Wales, but also as a frontline firefighter. I grew up in a bushfire town myself, and I know the feeling of driving away from a bushfire. I just cannot imagine what it feels like to drive into one. Thank you so much for your service.
Thank you. Look, it's just, as you know, living in a town that's often threatened by bushfires, you grow up knowing that you all have to band together. It's all about protecting community, and I grew up with that, watching Dad take off on the fire truck, Mum helping out, and so there was really no question what I'd do when I started to grow up, and I'm still doing.
You fought your first big fire when you were 12 years old, extraordinary, and have since spent decades both on the front line and in command centres. What was it like growing up as a firefighter?
Well, when I grew up, we were surrounded by National Park, and I remember looking out over the hills during summer, and there'd be orange glows all over the place. And I'd say to my mother, "So which one's Dad fighting?" And she'd go, "I think it's that big fire over there." And, you know, okay. And I remember him coming home late at night, black with soot and smelling like smoke. And I'd ask him about what happened, and he'd tell me stories about it. But we lived right across the road from the fire shed, and there was an old ex-World War II fire truck that I could ride faster on my push bike. I'd get to the fires before they did. But, and it was just in my blood. But I remember that day in October 1971 like it was yesterday, and my first big fire, and it was a mixture of being frightened, being awestruck, excited, and it was all the elements coming together: the heat, the wind, the dryness, the bushland, all the different ways that different trees and shrubs reacted. And I just found it fascinating, and I was hooked. But I look back and yeah, fear was a big part of it, but my dad was there and he just knew what to do, and he showed me how to stay safe. And then over the decades from there, I fought many, many fires under Dad's command. He was a volunteer, then I went into the full-time fire brigade, and it just held me in good stead right up to now. I'm back as a volunteer, sort of retired. Yeah, right. But I love doing stuff in the community, and fires is the thing I know.
Can you describe for us what Black Summer 2019-2020 was like for you?
Yeah, Black Summer, how can I put it? It was a horror show. I knew, together with 22 other former fire and emergency chiefs who I'd pulled together into emergency leaders for climate action, and we were able to speak out because we weren't employed by governments anymore, and we'd been muzzled, well and truly muzzled when we were employed. You didn't talk about climate change because it was political. But we saw the build-up. For example, in Tasmania, where big fire seasons used to be 30 years apart, had big fires in the late 90s, 2006, 2013, 2016, 2018, and the rainforests that had never burned were burning. The button grass in the highlands, the high country, the World Heritage areas that can't burn were burning. So this ecological catastrophe, and then we had big fires in Queensland, New South Wales as well. And we knew if it stayed dry, 2019 was going to be really bad. So we tried to warn the Prime Minister. So, and look, to cut a long story short, I fought fires all over the state. We were fighting fires from basically July, where the New South Wales fire season is supposed to start in October, which was just evidence that the fire seasons now are much longer because of climate change. We had the hottest, driest year ever, the worst fire danger conditions by far in history. And we lost 11 times more homes in New South Wales alone than the biggest fire season ever before, you know, in the years prior to that. And the fires went until we had floods in March 2020. So, and one catastrophe following another. So extremes in temperature, in weather conditions, and that's climate change at work. One of the big things that was different was fire-driven storms, which used to be rare and a thing of legend. Everybody saw them that summer. There were probably, I think 39 was the last count that the researchers are saying, where the average over the previous 40 years was 1.5 a year, you know, but it was ramping up. That's because it's so hot, so much drier, so much hotter. So we saw fires burning overnight as if they were burning during the day, and we just couldn't put them out. So absolute horror show, compounded by a government that lied and would not listen. And that was really upsetting.
You've said in the past, when fighting fires, you're so focused on the job that you got to get done that you often don't think about the danger, but there is something that scares you, and that is climate change. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, look, to be honest, and I often reflect, Dad was like this, and I remember him saying after one fire where we got trapped and we had to take shelter on a rock shelf and the fire went over the top of us, and there's a party of 12, one person was missing. We thought that he'd died and we found him in a creek. But I remember Dad saying, probably best not to tell your mum about this, mate. And I realise I've done that a lot over the years. I just don't tell the family. They say, how was work? Oh yeah, it was fine. You don't tell them about the rush to hospital and the fall or the cut or the. But it is dangerous. Firefighting is dangerous, and there's lots of situations where I came really close to losing my life, and many others have too. But you've got a fighting chance, and if you know a lot about the fires and how they react and the strategies, etc., you do have a fighting chance. But it's changing. What frightens me is I saw things during Black Summer, fires burning at night, 30-metre high flames at 1 in the morning. I've never seen that before. I've never seen the pyroconvective storms with lightning through the smoke and new fires starting 20 kilometres away because of lightning strikes, trees being ripped out by the roots next to me and thrown around like toothpicks. It was just utterly frightening. So what that means to me is future generations. We're seeing this across the world. Heat waves this week, unprecedented heat wave in the Western US, and there's heat alerts, fire alerts. Records, the wrong sort of records being broken everywhere. Floods in Pakistan, thousands killed, our floods, wild extremes. So that's what frightens me. If we don't dial down the heat, which means going net zero as soon as possible, forget 2050, that's too late. We've really got to put the accelerator pedal down. If we don't take this seriously, and if we don't phase out fossil fuels as quickly as we possibly can, future generations are in a world of hurt.
In your book, Firestorm, I've got a copy right here. I'm halfway through reading it myself. It's wonderful for those folks who want to grab a copy. You describe a shocking level of deliberate ignorance at the federal government level leading into the Black Summer bushfires. You personally tried to warn the government what was coming. What's your message for the incoming government on what's coming down the line in terms of climate change and the opportunities that you see as well?
Look, it's so refreshing to have a government that actually asks questions and listens. I will say their target, 43%, is much better than 26 to 28% cut by 2030. I understand politically why they chose that figure, but it's not enough. And the scientists are saying we really need to aim for 75% and wean ourselves off coal, oil and gas as quickly as possible. So first thing there are huge opportunities for Australia. The economists are saying we have all the minerals, the rare earths, we have the sun, the wind, the waves, to be a renewable power superpower, a renewable energy superpower. Mike Cannon-Brookes, he's got the sun cable going to Singapore. We can export energy that we draw from the sun. There's so many opportunities, and this government looks like it's going to do the right thing in a whole lot of ways. It's a bit concerning that there's some new exploration for coal and gas going on, because internationally we've been advised by the UN, no, nothing new, or we will miss the opportunity. So look, great opportunities, a government that listens compared to one that was not interested, and they were either not smart enough to be in government or they told lies, and either of those inexcusable. But it was so frustrating dealing with people who were manifestly stupid and couldn't understand yet they're supposed to be leading the country, and we saw where that took us. So, you know, and I'm not going to mince my words about that.
You've dedicated your book to your grandkids. Is their future what drives you in your advocacy work?
Yeah, I've got two beautiful little grandsons, Eamon and Ollie, and yeah, I take them out in the bush like my parents took me out into the bush, and I took my kids out into the bush, and teaching them about Indigenous history, the people who nurtured this land for tens of thousands of years, and then in just 200 we've been able to do a lot of damage. So, but there's millions of Eamons and Ollies out there, little boys and girls, and who might not have a good future. It's up to our generation. Now, you know, we've had 200 years of industrialisation, wealth and better health, etc. That's great. Now it's time for us to pay back. And the payback is keeping Eamon and Ollie and all those million or billions of kids out there safer in the future. We have to do it. We've got to do the heavy lifting. And yeah, that's what drives me.
Thank you so much for joining us, Greg.
Thanks, Jane. Pleasure.